Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has threatened escalating tariffs on key European allies unless the US is allowed to buy Greenland. Duties would start at 10% on February 1st and rise to 25% by June. European leaders rejected the demand, warning it could damage NATO unity, derail trade deals, and deepen transatlantic tension. Syrian government forces advanced into Kurdish-held areas near the Euphrates, taking Tabqa and key dams despite US calls to stop. Kurdish-led SDF has accused the army of violating a withdrawal deal and warned it would fight to hold remaining towns and oil fields. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has accused President Trump of fueling deadly protests that killed over 3,000 people. Khamenei has called Trump a criminal, while Iran blamed the unrest on US and Israeli interference amid mass arrests and internet shutdowns. EU and Mercosur leaders have signed the landmark free trade agreement in Paraguay after 25 years of negotiations, paving the way for what would become the EU's largest ever trade deal. The accord covers the EU with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, but still requires approval from the European Parliament. New York City Mayor Mamdani has appointed Tricia Shimamura as the city's new Parks Department Commissioner, tasking her with managing more than 30,000 acres of land. Mamdani has praised Shimamura's decade-long record of public service, while Shimamura called the role an honor and vowed to make a difference. According to official results reported by Ugandan media, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni won a seventh term with 71.65% of the vote, defeating opposition challenger Bobi Wine, who won 24.70%. Wine is expected to reject the outcome, alleging an unfair election marred by an internet shutdown, as tensions remain high following protests and security crackdowns. According to IMF statements, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $261 million disbursement for Ethiopia after completing the fourth review of its 48-month extended credit facility, bringing total IMF support under the program to just over $2.18 billion. India's aviation regulator has fined Indigo, which controls 65% of India's domestic market. The fine includes $2.45 million and ordered the airline to provide a $5.51 million bank guarantee, issue warnings to senior executives, and remove the head of operations control after about 4,500 flights were cancelled in early December. Now for this hour, we start with Russia and China. Tensions over Greenland have intensified after US President Donald Trump claimed that Russia and China are seeking control of the island, citing national security concerns. In response, President Trump has recently imposed a 10% tariff on 8 European nations, including NATO ally Denmark, after they opposed his push for a US takeover. Now, the European Union has strongly condemned the tariffs, warning that they could harm transatlantic relations and benefit Russia and China instead. Moreover, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has stressed the need for NATO to handle Greenland security rather than escalating tensions with tariffs. European leaders, including British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, have vowed to stand by Denmark and Greenland in the face of Trump's threats. NATO has deployed troops to Greenland following the ongoing dispute, while Russia and China have increased their presence in the Arctic. However, Russia has dismissed the idea of a threat to Greenland as a myth, and China has not commented on its stance yet. Now for this discussion, we welcome Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's a defense analyst and also a veteran, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us once again. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Suma.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, what cards can Europe realistically play to counter US's demands and counter US's, Trump in particular's, ambitions to acquire Greenland?
Well, Suma, first and foremost, I think this issue
Yes.
has raised tensions among the European Union and also the NATO allies, because this definitely would weaken the NATO as a entity and also European Union, because as it is among the European countries, there were certain differences as far the Ukraine war is concerned and also relations with China. So now this adds a new complexity, or I would say new dimension to the already very sensitive relations that are prevailing between the European Union and America, that is the transatlantic partnership, and also with the NATO allies. Because as a whole, you can see that there is a definite pushback amongst the European countries against President Trump's ambition to acquire Greenland. And on this issue, I think all countries are united. Now, with President Trump further becoming more aggressive and resorting to the tariff policy, imposing an additional 10% tariffs, definitely, I think this has not gone well with the European Union or the NATO allies. And at the same time, I'm sure President Putin and President Xi Jinping must be having a big laugh and enjoying this whole scenario, because now with this issue, I think the focus is off the Ukraine war, so President Putin can now have more free hand. At the same time, President Xi Jinping also will be quite elated, because the focus will shift from Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific and also on the Western Pacific. So I think, to my mind, it's time that President Trump, obviates such issues or such steps, because that is only going to complicate the relations, transatlantic relations, and also the union or the unity among the European Union and the NATO countries. Suma.
Yes, you mentioned and you highlighted that Putin and Xi might be having a good laugh out of this. So what exactly could have been Trump's motive from the beginning? Was it always to put tariff at the end of the day, or do you think he has other ambitions?
No, if you go back point in time in the first term
Yes.
of President Trump, he had expressed his desire to buy out the Greenland. So this idea is not totally new or off the hook, because he had this idea or the ambition. The second point is, if you look at the President Trump's national security strategy, which was released last year in December, he has categorically stated that as far as America is concerned, it wants to have total control over the Western Hemisphere, that is the Latin American countries and America's neighborhood. So Greenland stands out as a very close neighborhood of America. And President Trump has stated that would not like to have any influence of adversary powers like Russia and China. And you know that Russia stands very close to the Greenland, and with the Arctic route opening now, that will also ensure that Russia has a greater influence on Greenland and along with China, because China and Russia totally are today all-weather allies. So therefore, primarily, it is the strategic interest of President Trump to have control over Greenland, because he feels that with Greenland under America, then the NATO defense against Russia will be strengthened, and Europe will be more secure in case Greenland is part of America. Suma.
Thank you very much, Major General Gigi Dwivedi, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for a later discussion as well. Now, moving the focus on to Iran, US President Donald Trump has called for the end of Ali Khamenei's rule in Iran. This comes after the Iranian Supreme Leader blamed Trump for the deaths of protesters in Iran. In his response, Trump has condemned the Iranian leadership for using violence and repression to maintain control, stating that true leadership is based on respect, not fear or death. He criticized Khamenei for leading Iran to a point where the country is in ruins and its people are suffering. Trump has urged the Iranian leadership to focus on governing the country properly rather than resorting to extreme measures to suppress the protesters. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Peter Baum. He's the editor at Weekly Blitz, joining us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Baum, for joining us again. Now looking at this, now that it's just Trump and Khamenei calling each other just tit for tat situation and arguing with each other, how do you analyze the situation in Iran? We have also heard the reports of schools reopening in Iran. So is it de-escalating right now?
Okay, so many analysts following these events had expected that prior to where we are today, there would have been some kind of military action in Iran by the Trump administration to assist the protesters. Those same analysts never expected that the Iranian authorities would come back from the brink of being overthrown from where we were about a week ago, when it seemed as if the protests in all the major cities and in a lot of smaller ones, and I think in 26 of the 31 provinces, the anti-regime protesters were certainly gaining the other hand. During this last week, we've seen how the Iranian regime with the IRGC have fought back and, so it seems, quelled the vast majority of protests, although it must be added that we're getting very, very little information out of the country, but this is the feedback we're getting so far. Those same analysts had never expected, having acted so late in the day, that the Iranian regime would have been able to recover, but by using brute force, by killing, it seems like thousands of protesters, they have managed to retain power. And it also seems, from when the protests were at their peak, that the protests have died down. This is the current feedback we're getting. Now, running parallel with this has been the rhetoric from Donald Trump, which in the last few days has been stronger than beforehand. He's actually calling for regime change, and he's actually calling for the overthrow of the ruling Ayatollah Khamenei. We've also seen a build-up of military hardware and personnel in the Red Sea and Gulf states, having extracted the non-military personnel from the US bases. And we've also seen the European Union withdraw its embassy staff from Iran. So we're at a point of the Trump v. Khamenei, the regime versus the protesters, and where do we go from here? I would imagine in the days ahead there would be some kind of military action by Trump. He would look foolish if he didn't create some kind of opposition militarily to the regime, having said that he would back the protesters, there should be regime change, the Ayatollah needs to go. Running parallel with all this, we've seen that the Ayatollahs were threatening the American bases and Israel militarily, and many analysts again expected that there would be a flare-up between Israel and Iran. Indeed, Israel had been put on high alert. It now seems that that has somewhat diluted, but the threat is still there from both parties.
Yes.
My view is that given the build-up of the American fleet in the Red Sea, that at some stage, if it looks as if the regime are going to hold power, I think hold on to power, Trump, who would rather see the domestic opposition bring down the regime, will help the protesters. And that would be perhaps in the next 72 hours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baum, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Syria, the Syrian army fighting with Kurdish-led forces have seized the Omar oil field, which is Syria's largest, and the Konoko gas field in the country's east. The army is continuing its push into Kurdish-led held territories despite US calls to halt its advance in the towns in the area in Syria's north. According to media reports, the army took over the northern city of Tabqa and its adjacent dam, as well as the major Freedom Dam, formerly known as the Bath, west of the Syrian city of Raqqa. Meanwhile, the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces accused Damascus of betrayal over a withdrawal deal and reported fighting between the two sides in the country's north. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Peter Baum. He's the editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Baum, for staying with us. Now, how dangerous is this situation in Syria between the Syrian forces and the Kurdish, not Kurdish-led, but this SDF, Kurdish-led forces, or Kurdish majority areas? And also, what do you think, what can US do to contain this situation?
Yeah, this is a major geopolitical conflict that's cost thousands of lives and has received very little, if any, coverage in the UK and European press. It's quite staggering how this conflict has been ignored. I was on your programme just 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about the possibilities of the Kurds and the new Syrian regime coming to blows because no political solution had been found which would allow the Kurds the kind of autonomy they wanted in the new Syrian-led government. Now, even though France and the United Kingdom have helped Syria very recently by bombing ISIS in Syria, which were a threat to the current Syrian regime, even with that happening, the news story received so little coverage in the European media, it's quite perplexing. And this recent flare-up between Syrian-led forces and the Kurds is part of a much wider picture. And it seems to me that the Kurds have been severely let down by the United States and the European Union, who are clearly backing the Gilani regime in an effort to bring Syria into peace deals with Israel and to become a friend of the West. Also, moreover, we have to understand the role that Turkey is playing. Turkey has been the major backer of the Gilani regime and the main cause as to why Assad fled. And despite the belief that the Syrian army is a ragtag army of military incapables, they seem to have inflicted a very good job on the Kurds, who, as you know, control that part of Syria where all the oil fields are, and have just lost control overnight of the major oil field in Syria because of the military victory of the Syrian forces. I doubt very much whether the Syrian forces on their own could have undertaken the defeat of the Kurds in this in the town of Raqqa and the oil fields. The Kurds militarily have a history of 40 or 50 years of fighting the Turks very successfully, although very recently PKK, as you know, the terrorist Kurdish group, have laid down their arms. I fully believe that Syria must have had some help from the Turkish military in order to defeat, in order to inflict this current defeat on the Kurds in the oil fields. And it is staggering
Yes.
to me that neither the US nor the UK nor France have entered the conflict in any way, shape, or form, calling for dialogue, because they've severely let down the Kurds, who could be a huge asset to the United States in bringing down
Yes.
the Iranian regime under the Ayatollah. So it's a mess at the moment, but it seems to
Yes.
me that the NATO countries are backing the Syrian regime in trying to dilute the military capabilities and the influence of the Kurds in that part of Syria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Baum, for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to our next news. The U.S. Justice Department is pushing back against a request from two lawmakers, which is to appoint a special master to oversee the public release of documents related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. This comes as U.S. Representatives Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have criticized the department for its slow pace in releasing records connected to Epstein's case. Since December last year, the DOJ has been gradually releasing these documents, but Khanna and Massie argue that the department has not complied with the law requiring all records to be made public by December 19th. In their request, they called for a special master to monitor the release process. However, the Justice Department has filed a response asserting that Khanna and Massie do not have legal standing in the case and that their request is inconsistent with court procedures. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's a retired war veteran as well as Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies. Joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, looking at this, it's like every week there's a new added dispute between the feds and the state governments in US, and this one another one. What more can you tell us about this one?
Suma, this Epstein case
Yes.
has been on the horizon of the American media, and you're right that every week or 10 days we find new developments taking place. Now, the recent case is primarily that it was Khanna and Thomas Massie. They had moved a resolution that they should be appointing the special masters in this case, because as per them the Fed is not the Justice Department is not complying with the laid down rules and regulation, and the pace of release of various files has been rather slow, and to that extent they feel that in case the special master is appointed, then there will be a watch on the Justice Department, and therefore this will actually facilitate the faster release of files, and also they have raised the issue about the case that is going on between the US and Maxwell. Maxwell is also was involved in the Epstein files, and to that extent also they want that the full justice should be provided to Maxwell. Now these are the issues which are on the table, but the Justice Department has opposed this because they feel that, or they have stated that neither Khanna or Thomas have any stakes in the Maxwell case, and currently the procedure that is being followed is right, and there's no need for appointing the special masters in this case, Suma.
Right. And so what do you think, what does this Justice Department refusal to appoint a special master reveal about the Justice Department's motive or their bigger goal, and also what are the broader political implications if members of Congress are seen as lacking the authority to enforce disclosure laws on the Justice Department?
Suma, this Epstein case has also become a slugfest between the Democrats and the Republicans. And willy-nilly, the Justice Department toes the line of the government of the day. And to that extent, there have been a lot of noise about this issue that while this case of Epstein, came up as a bipartisan approach, but over the period of time, it has taken the two parties on the, daggers drawn, because two very important personalities are involved in this. One is the serving President Trump and the former President Clinton. So therefore, there is a feeling that the Justice Department definitely is lenient to the issues of the current government of the day, and therefore, these two judges have wanted that the special master be appointed so that there is some kind of a watch or supervision on the activities of the Justice Department. Asuma.
With that, I would like to thank Major General Gigi Dwivedi for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to India. An Indigo Airlines flight traveling from Delhi to Bagdogra was forced to make an emergency landing after a bomb threat on board. Police say a message claiming a bomb was written on a tissue paper found in the aircraft's toilet. The flight landed safely in Lucknow today. There were around 230 passengers, including infants, along with pilots and crew. After landing, the aircraft was then moved to an isolation bay, and security agencies are now carrying out a full search of the plane. Now we move on to our tech news. Google has asked a US judge to delay sharing its data with rivals as it appeals a ruling that found the company holds an illegal monopoly in the online search. A federal judge has ruled last year that Google used unlawful tactics to protect its dominance. Google says forcing it to share data now could expose trade secrets if the ruling is overturned. The company is willing to comply with the other limits, including shorter app preloading deals. US antitrust enforcers are still weighing whether to seek tougher remedies. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more updates from around the world.